Well, good morning, folks. I'm one of Judy and Rick's lot as well, originally, a quantity surveyor. And Judy went to some lengths to explain what that was at the start. I must say, I spent my whole life trying to explain to family and friends what a quantity surveyor is. What do you do for a living? Quantity surveyor. What's that? 20 minutes description, which ended with, well, what's really a quantity surveyor? And I only found one definition that people got and sought to understand, and that is, you all know what an accountant is. Well, to understand what quantity surveyor is, or what a quantity surveyor is, just think about an accountant who's lost that scintillating sense of humour that accountants are famous for, and then you've got a quantity surveyor. But Rick would probably kill me for saying that around here. Could I ask you each to take a couple of cards and then pass the deck on to others? We'll start off with a card trick. This is something I come up with that you may find useful. As you may have noticed in many of the classes around the campus, there seems to be an increasing number of students from the international arena, if you like. And quite a lot of those are Asian, in particular Chinese. And one of the traits of the Southeast Asian and Chinese cultures is not to put yourself forward. It's not to sort of progress ahead of anybody else. So if you ask the group for questions, do they have any questions or is there anything they want to clarify, you'll normally find no response. They'll just sit there. If you go and ask them, they have the information and they're prepared to answer. If their language isn't so good, they feel a little embarrassed. But even when they are answering, you tend to find, or I tend to find, there's a reticence to come forward. It's almost like, why me? Why am I being singled out? Has anyone found that experience? Well, I thought there's got to be a way to get over this, because these people have an incredible amount of experience from their culture that's good for people from our cultures to understand. And the learning just doesn't come from the guy at the front of the room. It comes from everybody in the room. So this little trick works for me, so you can try it yourself. So pretty much everybody's got a couple of cards, and the person that, from particularly China, who doesn't like the sort of meaning of what a deck of cards has not yet been born, I discovered. So I simply give them out at the start of any course, a couple of cards. If there's 25, there'll be 2 each. If there's a lot, there'll be 1 each. And the way it works is if you turn up late or if you're using your iPhone or something during class, you get another card, which increases your propensity to be asked questions, and therefore they tend not to use iPhones. And if I'm finding there's not a lot of natural engagement, or if there's a predominance of the local people asking the questions, and the Chinese are happy to take the knowledge, but they don't want to get involved, I simply bring the deck out. And I normally notice with the more flair you introduce it, the more the interest among the group. And you see eyes looking in different directions, and we get them to turn them up so their neighbours can see if they're trying to cheat and all this sort of stuff. And we simply cut the deck. So whoever happens to have the 6 of diamonds in the room at the moment, who is it, by the way? You need to look over shoulders, people cheat. Aha. Well, the question would go to you, but that's not the way it works, because I also learned early on, if I pick the deck first and ask the question, everybody else goes, thank Christ, it's not me, switches off, and no one's learning anything. So the way we do it is we ask the question first, then we cut the deck, and they don't know till the last minute. But to add even another dimension of staying engaged, sometimes people simply don't know the answer. And they tend to be embarrassed if you ping them, particularly if they come from Southeast Asian nations. So what we give them is each class they get 2 chances to cut the deck again or to nominate one of their friends to answer. So it's just a little trick that you may or may not like, and it's quite useful for getting people engaged. And I think in any quiet group. So I leave it with you and see how it goes for you. My main reason here today is to talk about not so much high-tech stuff, and if I may, as by way of an endorsement to Judy and Rick, that particular software, which is put out by Sparkle, I've been using for probably 4 or 5 years in the corporate world. I've done literally hundreds of videos on it. It is the most engaging thing. You can use all sorts of colours and animations beyond what's there, all sorts of voiceover technologies and inserts. They just put out a new version of it. And if anybody wants to learn how to use it, it's literally, to be able to put your first video out, it's literally an hour learn. Just get in touch with myself up at, I'm a few doors up from Rick. I'm more than happy to grab the learning lab and run through a quick lecture. I'm not kidding, you could be producing videos in literally an hour. It's brilliant stuff. What's more, you might wonder where the drawings come from and things like that. They've got a library that just goes forever. Rick did that music himself. They've got a library of background music that's just immense. But you can take any photograph or any drawing from absolutely anywhere on your computer and have that hand do it. You can even change it to your own hand if you particularly want to. So I endorse it fully. So I'll get my tools for the main part of this presentation. I think we ought to be turning to the old days. You know, if you don't get your assignments done, out comes the cane. But that's not really what we're going to do. The cane's here as a tool for learning that I find particularly useful. My background is in construction, but I'm also in psychotherapy, counselling, hypnotherapy, things like that. So we use this sort of tool for both teaching here in the education of the building type people, and also when I taught in England at psych colleges and things, we also use it there for things like self-awareness, communication, for training psychotherapists and things like that. So it's got a very broad application in here. But rather than tell you what it's about, I thought we'd just experience it, and that way you'll know how it works for you. So we have, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's close enough. So we can probably get 2 groups going here. Actually, the bigger the number of people on one cane for the exercise, the more you can draw out the conclusions, but you'll see that as we go. So we don't have enough people for more than 2 tests. What we need you to do, and normally I'd use the cards, by the way. The cards come in handy if you want to break people into groups. Spades in that corner, hearts in this corner, clubs over there, and it's all done in seconds, and what's more, they're communicating as they do it. So they have multiple uses. I won't use the cards for this because I only gave out half the deck. It's not a huge group. But if I could just get everybody to work with us on this one, break pretty much into 2 groups, and what we'd like you to do is have an equal number of people on either side of each group facing each other. So if you had 8 in a group, you'd have 4 people just facing each other. So can we move just behind the tables? So we'll do it sort of in this zone. So if we could get someone take the first stick from there, and someone take this stick just for the moment. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and over here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, we need an equal number either side, and we need at least 1 policeman per group. So in this particular group here, we'll get 1 person to stand out and be the police person. 4 on this side, 4 on this side. Do you mind being the police person and helping me out in that group? So if you take the stick, just be careful we don't poke eyes out. And over here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. Will you be the police person? Okay, now if you sort of stay in that position, the idea now is to crunch up so you're pretty much shoulder to shoulder. I'll explain what's going to happen. I'll work with this group. And what's your name, sorry? Brittany will work with this group. What we're going to get you to do, if you could just turn this way for the moment, we're going to get you to extend your hands like this with your fingers out, 90 degrees, and just walk into your fingers just overlap. Now at that point in time, Brittany for that group and me over there is simply going to put the stick on top of your fingers. We'll hold it, and we're going to get everybody to put their fingers in contact with the stick when we do it, right? Underneath the stick, you can't grab it, it must be resting. The rules are everybody's finger must be on the stick at the same time. I won't do it just yet. They must all be on the stick at the same time, and you have 1 objective. Just hold on a sec, folks. One of the problems we have in project management is starting the project before we get the full briefing. So if you hold that, Brittany, you know what the deal is here. I'll do it here now. So basically speaking, you're going to take your... This is a right angle, folks. This is less than a right angle. So down at a right angle, and I'll put it across. Now for both groups, when I rested and when Brittany rested, cross your fingers, you have 1 goal, and that is to lower it to the ground. However, I'm the policeman, Brittany's the policewoman, and the whole idea is you must all have your fingers in contact all the time. The minute the fingers break away, you start again, and you lower it to the ground. You cannot grip it, you cannot have older hand grips, it just got to rest on your fingers. Easy instructions, we've got PhDs and brains hanging out of our ears here. So easy to happen. Okay, Brittany, you ready? Let's set it up, fingers in contact, and now lower it to the ground, and my job is to make sure your fingers are always in contact. No, folks, the ground is down here, that's the sky up there. Fingers in contact, must be in contact. Fingers in contact. Okay, we have to start again because we're out of sync here. So back to start again.
Can we just drop it?
No. Away you go, try again. Don't let them cheat, Brittany. Single finger off, make them start again. The ground's down here, folks. Just a minute.
We should be down by the bottom.
Project stagnation, I see.
It is, isn't it? All right. Definitely.
It's not going up anymore. That's
Oh, we're going up again.
I think the trick is not to watch. Just feel down. Come on, Alan, that's the trick.
Okay, now I'll get everybody to stop at that point, if you would. Excuse a sec. I have to fast track it because of time limitations. This thing can go for hours if you do it normally. Great to hear that, right? The first thing we come to conclude, and let's say we take this from a project's environment, quite easily we can transfer it to psychology or whatever we want to do. But from a project's environment, the first thing I did was stand up in front of you wearing my dark suit instead of a jeans and a t-shirt, putting on everything about an authoritative air that I can possibly put, which is exactly what people do when they want someone to respond without question. And we all have that psychological bias from school days, etc., and that's exactly what happened here. So I'm your client, I've told you what to do, and whereas the intelligent in this room every time would sit down and say exactly what the hell are we meaning here, what do they want, what are the goals, how are we going to go about it, and strategize, and practice what you preach to people every day of the week, and you do that without thinking, I just brought in a greater level of authority than I presume you'd be likely to use in your classroom so that I triggered off your psychological bias to respond in the way I wanted you. And let's just do the bloody exercise before you strategize how it might work. So point number one from a project, I'm talking in psych projects here to try and keep everybody involved. But from a pure project perspective, don't believe what the client tells you is what they actually want. Because generally speaking, they haven't got a bloody clue. They know what they think they need. They haven't got a clue what they really need or want. Our job is to question everything they say and find out. And once you've done that, the concept of a team being a group of people who get together and work things out with equal decision making is a fallacy created by people who've never run a project in their life. I, on the other hand, run a few projects in my life, including the Sydney Olympic Stadium, and tell me if you can't bring out a bit of Hitler in yourself occasionally, you'll never be able to run a project like that. But the point is, we got the best brains we could get, and we sat around and we agreed what would be a reasonable leadership style and a strategy to deliver it. So my suggestion now would be to see how it goes if you actually elect one leader, and let me see if I've pinged you a little bit here. Did you find yourself looking at the other people saying they're doing it wrong? Why don't they do it? Why are they lifting it up? Why are they lowering it down? Everybody just say yes and fast track this thing, please. Okay, so the first thing we do is we presume we're right, and the blame lies out there. Now, I'll let you psychologists go berserk with that one in your own turf. So you can run it with a group of clients, even in group therapy, but don't use sticks, use foam rods. They can't hurt each other with those, right? But basically speaking, we have this situation where everybody is blaming everybody else instead of saying, what's my role as agreed in a group and what the leader is, and getting on with it. Try that, see how you go. Electing a leader, coming up with a strategy, and doing the exercise again. Fingers are off, start again.
Just down. A couple of millimeters down. We're going up.
Oh, we're going around in circles now. Looks like the Rugby World Cup. We promised never to let students see this video. Ah, fingers on top, that breaks the rules. Innovative, but breaks the rules. Okay, well done. Okay, now what we'll do here is we'll gather around here and criticise, all right?
That's a good idea.
Jonathan? Okay, down the end there. I'm sorry, black coat.
Linda.
Okay, let me make one more suggestion. You've elected a leader. I don't have a clue who it is, because it could be one of three from what I'm seeing here at the moment. So who has been elected the leader?
I think I was.
Okay, then I'd suggest that the only person who looks anywhere except at his or her own two fingers is the leader. So your job is just to look at your fingers and do what the leader says.
The Ataf, Alicia, down. Good. Yeah, we're doing great job though. Jonathan, down. Good.
Okay, you've got the trick now, and given the time limitations, that'll probably do it. So round of applause. So let's take a seat and have a chat about that, shall we? A very simple exercise, but it brings a lot out. As I said, people will respond to authority or figures of authority. There's been all sorts of experiments done on that, the prison experiment being the most famous one. But this is another one that brings it out. And it's just making the point to people, if you're going to be doing projects for clients, don't assume they know what they're talking about. At undergrad level, I normally go a bit extreme and say, just presume your client is an idiot, but not really. Just presume they don't know what they need to know to make the decisions. And our job is to make sure they have it. The second thing this draws out from a leadership perspective is if you push this to its end, you come up with a very good model for Tuchman's learning model, where in the forming stage, people are all keen to give it a go and get involved, but it takes very little time with a group like this if you police it with, pre-trained police people at the end really putting pressure on, saying, you broke the rules, do it again. And particularly if you train them to pick on just one or two people from breaking the rules. It takes very little time for the rest of the group to obviously get ticked off at the two people who you're picking on the whole time. So it's very, very easy to induce the Tuchman concept of the storming stage, where people are all having a problem with everybody else and not realizing that the others are having a problem with them. And then we might sit down after that storming stage and have a discussion and say, what are the problems? So we create a broader sense of awareness of what the problems are. And normally when you do that, they feel comfortable to open up to a whole stack of other problems they have on, like I got hammered last night, or there's someone sick in the family. And all these things come out. So you're demonstrating with a very simple exercise the importance of the team environment, of sharing feelings and sharing awareness as a process for regulation of those very things in a team environment. And it's the leader's role to encourage that. Then the next thing, what made it work? Well, in this case here, they basically cheated, but project management is an environment in which begging forgiveness is just as important as asking permission. And if we were still waiting for approval from the government on the early stages of Olympic Stadium, we'd still be waiting for the Olympics to occur in Sydney. We just basically asked questions. If they didn't answer, we just got on and do it. It just did it. It was as simple as that. The ability to know when you can break the rules, because it's really not a bad thing to do in terms of the overall objectives, that's cool. But to do that without discussion and unilaterally, that becomes dictatorial, and it ticks everybody else from the client off down to everybody working. In this group here, despite the fact we said the fingers have to stay underneath, the couple said, well, let's put them on top at either end, and that'll stabilise the stick. If we had a stick here that was a broomstick, this thing's easy to do because you've got the weight and you've got the sensation. If you have no sense for the project, you're not a good contributor to the project. So I pick something light like this, or a piece of plastic conduit. It doesn't give you a sense of anything, and with that sensory deprivation, it makes it too difficult in the group to be able to contribute effectively. But if we use a solid piece of timber where everybody can get in tune with their sensory connection with what's going on in the project and the team, you get it first time, every time. And there's a great learning thing there as well. And by doing that, we move them through the norming stage. And after that, through the performing stage, etc. And most of you would know the Tuchman model, so I won't go into that. There's a recent development on the Tuchman model we also bring up in this experiment. I don't know whether anybody's heard of it. Some organisational psychologists brought it up. Whereas in the early stages of the model, it's all about me and who cares about the project and the others. You talk the talk, but you're not walking the walk. You're really concerned about you and your involvement. By moving through the storming stage, you raise the others in your opinion, so you're getting a closer thing to equality. We used to think in the norming stage, everybody got up to equal. I'm working with Nicole and Jonathan, and now we're all equal. That's not what really happens. What happens in the norming stage, according to the shrinks, is we take ourselves below the others and look up to them because we become to respect them. And that opens a case where groupthink comes in, and that's the last thing you want in a project. So we demonstrate by the process, by including things that are stupid to do as an instructor that no one picked on it. And this time we don't do it from authority perspective. We do it from very humble perspective, and no one picks on it. And the reason is now they're part of a team, and the team is bigger than they are, so I'm not going to criticise anything stupid. And that groupthink leads to mistakes, poor outcomes, and eventually, of course, to corruption in some certain possibilities. So it's a very, very good, simple technique for teaching these things. So let's finish off with an icebreaker. The reason I'm doing the icebreaker last is it's another useful tool, and I wanted to make sure we got the main one in, but this is just another one you might find half useful. We can do this in table groups. So who's a good catch, Jonathan? Good on you, well done. Okay, this is very simple. 3 circles out here, and I normally do this at the start of the classes we do on human resource management, and if they're just getting a bit tired after lunch or something, I'll just pull it out. But I normally do it on our human resource resource management project up front, because we do a lot of practical stuff in that. I like getting them outdoors at least once or twice during a course and doing stuff outside, away from the slides. So with this one here, it's very simple. 3 circles just behind the tables, and I'll explain it, we'll do it. The person with the ball can give it to anybody or keep it themselves to kick it off. There's no real leadership required. Yes, just move, make them a little slightly expanded, the circles, if you would. It's going to be easier in Ralph's group. Now what you do is one person start with it. Jonathan, if you just start with it, and who's got it here? You've got it here, and Ralph's got it there. Now the idea here is I want the person with the ball at the moment to throw it to everybody in the group. They must throw it back to you, and you throw it to a different person in completely random order until everybody has touched the ball once by you throwing them. So go ahead and do that now, and yell finished when you're finished. More random there if you can, Jonathan. You're done because you've got a small group. Done? Righto. You done, Jonathan? Right, so we're somewhere between 12 and 20 seconds to do that. Now the next stage of the exercise, and keep in mind we'd be doing this with people who, if they've met each other before, it's only briefly on another class. And it's all about people getting to know each other and just get into working with other very quickly, which is a bit false here because you all, or most of us, will know each other probably at some level. The next step is we're going to get you now to repeat the exercise, which was essentially everybody in the group touching the ball in a certain order. So we need you to remember the order in which the ball was thrown to you. And then we want you to come up with a means of touching the ball in exactly that order without it touching the ground and reducing the time from 12 seconds, in your case 20 seconds around here, to the shortest possible time you can do it. So someone timing, whatever approach you want to come up with, you can get the circle tighter, you can do whatever you like. Everybody touching the ball in the same order you did it as quickly as you possibly can. Up to you. Is timing yourselves? Try again, see how quick you go. Are you really meeting the brief?
We're touching it in the same order.
Mm-hmm. She's touching it the whole time. How did you do it?
We put the ball and we were just touching.
No, so you held it the whole time. Is that what you did the first time? Try again. How did you guys come up with it?
We did it.
You just did the throwing in a short group. Okay. See if you can make it faster still. There is a way of making it faster still. Yeah, timing it. You guys have got an advantage over these guys being smaller, and with a group like this, just doing the original exercise again is normally the faster, but with a big group that doesn't work. They just get panicked.
No,
yeah.
no.
So there are other ways. The only rule is it's got to be in the same order without touching the ground. So what these guys did, if I may, Ralph, is one guy held it and everybody else touched it in the order. But that's not what they did the first time because he got rid of it every time.
And it has to be the same.
You have to repeat the same order. Yeah. Someone's feeling very proud of themselves. What happened?
Shelley's idea, we went down the row and passed it back and forth.
We might just gather around and get the ideas here now. So what did you do? Sorry?
Just went down the row and passed it back and forth. I walked along.
Threw it back and
Yeah, okay. So that's pretty much the same as RAL groups did, but they got a small group they did in a circle. So you reduce the time very effectively. Now, here's the interesting thing, and the exercise here is as much about listening skills as strategy and thinking. The only restriction I put on you that is it had to be in the same order and it had to touch the ground. So what most groups do is what you two did. Couldn't touch the ground, my apologies, Judy. So what most people did is the originator, or the leader, if you want a better phrase, started off by holding it and everybody else went bang, bang, bang in the same order. But that's not what happened, because the leader let go of it every time before, right? So that doesn't work. But I made a restriction of don't put it on the ground as one of the rules. And the way people interpret that is don't put it anywhere out of your hand. It's just psychological bias coming in. So all I've done is led you up a garden path and you took it to every garden path possible. There's nothing in the book that said you couldn't put it on a chair or on a table or over here like this, and then have you lined up in the order you're in with Jonathan here, just going bang, and everybody else going through, just touching it with their finger, and Jonathan going ding, 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 ding in between. Let's take a seat and talk about that. So without talking about what we're doing here, because I'm really pushing, these things we do for half an hour or so, right? We're pushing it through for 5 minutes here, and there's two reasons for that. One, if we give you all the time in the world, you guys are going to get this stuff quickly. You know each other, you teach all the time. So I've progressed it along to create a false situation so that you could see how learning might come from it. So let's not talk about what we did and what we didn't do wrong. The most important thing at the end of these things is to have people gain insight from it. So what do you think some of the learning from that would be that you'd expect students to come up with? Notice how I said expect students to come up with, so you don't feel bad if you can't come up with anything. But anyway, anyone at all? Yeah?
I think one is that assumptions can be dangerous. And
Absolutely.
counterproductive.
Yep. So the first thing, how would you overcome the assumption or the group assumption? What might be one way you could do that?
Clarify the instructions.
Yeah? And what might be some way of clarifying instructions, obviously by questions, but how would you get to the sort of questions you might want to ask? What was the first thing we did on this thing? I gave you the ball, gave you an exercise, said go ahead and did the other. Now in so doing it, I triggered one thing off in every person, in every group probably, or I tried to, and that's a sense of competition. I told you what had to be done, and then I said, and you need to do it as quick as you possibly can. Now, if you were born in Australia, England, or anywhere else and spent 2 days in this place and you haven't learned how competitive that we need to be to survive, we're missing the point of it all. But it's very easy to trigger people's point of competition. And it's the same in the work environment. Competition destroys work environments as well as makes them successful and extremely profitable. We need our competition in a work environment external with the other people we're competing with. But in order to encourage it out there, we establish it as a culture inside, and it destroys individuals because of bullying and people being walked over, and the goal is to get to the absolute top of the place, and anywhere else in between doesn't count. And that's totally reinforced by our advertising that says, unless you've got the best of everything, you're no good. How do you get the best of everything? Go higher, earn more money, you can buy more stuff. We completely culturally organise people to be counterproductive in the workplace and in projects. Our job as leaders is to counteract that. And what we need to encourage people to do is to take the responsibility to sit down and analyse what they've been asked to do, to look at the problems and put in a thing that we call in the projects world as planning. If you're talking about this in the psych world, you're talking about us coming up with an intervention strategy. If you're talking about it in leadership, you're talking about how does it fit to a vision. It doesn't matter, all of these things apply in any world, or most worlds, a broad scope of worlds. But the last thing we want people to do is to use a ready, fire, aim approach to the projects we give them. And that's what we encourage them to do. We've got to get it done yesterday. We've got to get it done as cheap as possible. And if anybody challenges it, it's, well, if you can't do it, I'll find someone who can. That's really bad leadership. What we need to be doing is encourage people to take the time to analyse the question being asked, not respond to the competitive challenges. Indeed, the Project Management Institute these days says if a client asks you to do something that you don't think is possible and you don't tell them, it's unethical not to tell them that what they're asking for is ridiculous. Not very career enhancing to do that, by the way, but you'll feel good when you're working in Afghanistan because you're ethical in doing it, right? So I think you've got the messages here and the sort of messages that are going to be put over.